Hello everyone and welcome back to The Wire. My name is Gabe. We're filming this update on Friday, August 4th, which just so happens to be the third anniversary of the massive explosion at the port of Beirut in 2020, which killed 218 people, wounded over 6,000, and left much of downtown Beirut in rubble. The deadly catastrophe exposed the depth of corruption within the Lebanese government and turning a blind eye to the activity of the terrorist group Hezbollah, which has been storing hundreds of tons of ammonium nitrate in a warehouse at the port for years. So far, efforts for both internal and international investigations into the cause of the blast and how to dispense justice for it have been frustrated, with one group of Lebanese survivors and their families writing to the United Nations Human Rights Council today that, quote, on the third anniversary of the explosion, we are no closer to justice and accountability for the catastrophe, end quote. In addition to being a Shia Islamic militant organization, Hezbollah is also a political party and social welfare organization in Lebanon, which has come to effectively control the southern region of the country where Shia Islam is the majority. Hezbollah was established in Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War in 1982 by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and has benefited from Iran's patronage to the tune of billions of US dollars each year, an entire arsenal of weapons making it the most powerful non-state military in the world, and has also received advanced military technology from Iran, especially guided missile technology, which presents an existential threat to the state of Israel. As Beirut families grieved the loss of loved ones and the lack of justice for the third year in a row, Hezbollah continued its provocations along Lebanon's internationally recognized frontier with Israel. The so-called Blue Line is not an official border between the two nations because no peace treaty has ever been ratified by the two states since Israel became a modern nation in 1948. However, both nations have generally observed the UN-mandated Blue Line since the Israeli military withdrew from southern Lebanon in the year 2000. The Blue Line now passes through a small village named Gahar in the northeast, splitting it north and south between Lebanon's Sheba Farms region and the Israeli Golan Heights. The residents of Gahar are mostly Arabs who practice Alawite Islam, an offshoot of Shia Islam. The northern half of Gahar was used by Hezbollah to stage attacks on the Jewish state in 2006 during the Second Israeli-Lebanese War, during which time Israel occupied the entire town in order to prevent it from being used by terrorists to attack Israel. Later, the Israeli military withdrew its occupation from the northern half of the town and only ventures there when needed, but the Lebanese government still has no official presence there. A local council ordered a fence to be constructed around the northern border of the town last September, which became a pretext for Hezbollah to begin its provocations. This April, Hezbollah crossed the Blue Line and set up 2 tents on the Israeli side of the disputed Sheba Farms area. Israel protested to the United Nations and threatened military action, after which one of the tents was dismantled, but not the other. The presence of Hezbollah in the disputed region has threatened a showdown between Israel and the terrorist organization at a time when Israeli intelligence believes that Hezbollah views political turmoil inside Israel as a sign of weakness, creating an opportune time for them to provoke a conflict. The current tension between Israel and Hezbollah, as well as between Israel and militant groups in the West Bank, has been bankrolled and encouraged by Iran, which also supports Palestinian militant groups such as Hamas and Islamic Jihad, with millions of dollars, weapons, and material every year. The rise of jihadist groups in the West Bank has initiated a power struggle with the Palestinian Authority and its rival factions, which spilled over into Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon last month, where at least 11 people have been killed in street violence and targeted assassinations of PA officials. Although Hamas is growing in grassroots popularity across the West Bank in cities like Jenin and Nablus, the iron grip of Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip for the last 15 years is becoming more and more tiresome to the residents of Gaza, who have lived continually with political corruption, joblessness, inadequate medical care, and food, water, and fuel shortages. Simmering unrest finally boiled over into massive but peaceful demonstrations across the Gaza Strip this week, as tens of thousands of ordinary citizens took to the streets to demand the ouster of the militant group from power, chanting slogans such as, "The people want the regime to fall," a chant that was popularized by street protests in Iran last year. Those protests in Gaza soon were quelled by Hamas security forces who intimidated, arrested, and beat protesters in the streets. All of this is happening while the Iranian nuclear program continues almost unabated, with Iranian oil revenues reaching their highest level since before the end of the Iranian nuclear deal in 2017. China is Iran's biggest oil customer right now, with orders tripling in recent months, swelling Iran's currency reserves from $4 billion in 2020 to almost $44 billion now. All of this, along with ongoing political turmoil between secular and religious political factions inside Israel, does not bode well for the Jewish state. That's why FAI believes this is the perfect time to launch the new Genesis Project, announced at our recent Maranatha End Times conference by Dalton Thomas and IDF Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Marco Moreno. The initiative will eventually partner believers from Western churches with the Israeli Defense Forces to receive crisis response training in Israel before assigning them to Israeli communities where they can respond rapidly in the event of a natural or man-made disaster. In addition to serving communities inside Israel, the Genesis Project also recognizes and provides internationally recognized and certified training from the best crisis response teams in the world, that is, the teams in Israel, which can be used anywhere in the world when disaster strikes, including among unreached people groups where Israeli citizens cannot go. Imagine Gentile Christians, in partnership with the Jewish state, providing relief, care, and good news rapidly anywhere in the world to those who need it. It's Operation Good Neighbor 2.0 on steroids, and I recently sat down with an American pastor whose congregation is gearing up to participate in the project. I asked him about his thoughts on why Genesis is such a groundbreaking and timely opportunity in this season of history. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Matt Whiteford. Many of you who attended the Maranatha End Times Summit a couple of weeks ago in Dallas, Texas, probably recognize Matt. He is both a valuable member of the FAI family, helping us in various capacities, and he's also my pastor. And so I invited him here today because Matt is active in the early stages of the Genesis Project, and I'd like to take a few minutes to ask him some questions and get some responses that will hopefully provoke some thinking and prayerful consideration on your parts as to how you might be engaged with the Genesis Project, whether that's by prayer and giving or possibly even by joining the teams that will be part of this effort. So Matt, first of all, thank you for joining us today. My first question for you is, why do you think that the Genesis Project is crucial for such a time as this? What about this season of history makes the Genesis Project so timely?
Yeah. I think a couple things. One is that the speed at which we get information is, so quick. And then also our ability to respond, if we have the right avenues, we can respond to that quick information, but we need the right avenues. And as Scripture says, there is not going to be less local and global crisis happening as we move forward to the return of Christ. And so I think Genesis is really significant because I think it checks a handful of really significant boxes, but really what it does for, as you said, such a time as this, is that it is not easy for us to be prepared to respond. Typically, we respond after something happens and try to figure out what to do. Genesis prepares us before things happen and gets us into a place where we are able to respond with flexibility and speed to the things that are happening. And we just know from Scripture that the birthing pangs are going to increase in their frequency and intensity as time goes by, no matter where we are in the timeline. So I think it's really significant for those reasons.
Very much so. How do you feel like the Genesis Project allows the Gentile churches, especially in the Western world, to fulfill their biblical mandate to care for the people of Israel?
Yeah. For a long time in this country, the evangelical church has stood behind Israel. And there's a big theme in our history of standing with Israel. But I don't know that Israel, at least those on the ground, can feel or experience that standing with Israel outside of a national leader or whoever we vote into office. What the Israelis experience, the Jews in Israel experience, is primarily people from the church going to tour and not necessarily engaging on a heart level. There is nothing that draws people together more than when they walk through suffering or crisis or anything like that together. When you think of people who you are most connected to on a deep level, it's people who've been there when you needed them. And so I think this is almost maybe a line in the sand of, do we really believe what we say as the church? Do we really believe that we are called to stand with Israel? And so to me, this whole thing with Genesis, how it's opened this door, we actually get to do something. And again, touring the Holy Land isn't a bad thing, but in my mind, we get to do something real with real fruit bearing possibility through this kind of access and relationship, and actually standing for Israel, not just standing here for Israel, but standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel in the moment of crisis. And so, again, it's not just an evangelical American church cry of stand for Israel. It's a call of Scripture for the church to represent and reflect the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, back to the Jews who are going to believe. But they're probably not going to believe because I took a tour to the Holy Land. It's a much greater opportunity for them to see Jesus in me if I'm standing side by side in the moment of a famine or an earthquake or the casualties of war.
Absolutely. One more question for you. How does the project, the Genesis Project, serve the church's mission to take the gospel to every tribe and tongue so that Jesus can return?
Yeah, I think the most extraordinary thing about the Genesis program is that at a foundational level, a parachurch mission organization, FAI, has done the hard labor that has come over years of slow moving, but they've done the hard labor to put together this creative access and this incredible open door. But they've brought it together, they've opened up the door, they've handed this as a gift to the church, basically saying to the church, here, we've gone through the hard things to fulfill your mission, and now we're giving it back to you so that you can go and do what has always been the church's responsibility. And so when I think about fulfilling the church's mission and Genesis being a part of that, Genesis isn't the answer to everything that the church has to do. But man, it really puts the church in a great position because the church historically, when we go all the way back to Acts and then we look at the development of God's people in the church moving forward, what you see is that the most significant moments of reflecting and participating in the sufferings of Jesus is when the church, the people of God, are in a place, even having been persecuted. They're not those who are on top of the heap, they're under the heap. But then crisis comes, and not only do those people of God bring relief to those who are also economically or physically or challenged, but they are bringing relief to those very people who've persecuted them. So for me, what I see in Genesis is not only an opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, being an image bearer of the Messiah, but also what I see is that the church can get trained to respond as it always has, rather than be inward focused, to be outward focused, and to respond as it always has, and made the greatest kind of inroads for King Jesus in history when not from a place of power or authority, but from a place of humility, come and bring relief to those who've treated us well and those who haven't. And I just see this Genesis program as something that can equip us that way. And then it's our job to take that out. I mean, just imagine what all of the, whoever your enemies are that you see in who we feel like maybe are against Christianity or whatever that is. Imagine what the loss of words that they have when something happens and the very church that they may hate shows up and brings the greatest relief in that moment. And so I think, man, that has always been the mission of the church, to bring Jesus into those places. And this is a creative way to do that honestly, I think the church has been given. And I think as a pastor and as a Jesus follower, I've got to think long and hard whether or not I can ignore this opportunity.
Yeah, very well said. Well, thanks, Matt, for coming and giving us your perspective on the project. For those of you who want to take the next step and learn more, you can go to genesiscrisisresponse.com. That's a website where it's still under construction, but you can sign up there to get email updates as the program develops. It's still kind of in its infant stages, but it's growing rapidly, and we hope to begin fielding teams soon within the coming months. So you can go there to get updates. We're also looking for regional directors for the program. So if you're already engaged with FAI and fully on board with the Maranatha message, you might be a good candidate for regional director of the Genesis Project program. You can find out more about that by sending an email to info@genesiscrisisresponse.com. Thank you very much to all of you for watching. We love you all. Blessings and Maranatha.